Ladies and gentlemen, for once it works. Welcome to an amazing smorgasbord of musical dessert that was prepared by the members of the congregation. I'm so proud that my vision of 40 years, a work in progress, is still growing. Because if you look at the program, I have nothing to say. The congregants said it all. It just confirms that what I was allowed to do here turned out correctly. So I asked my lovely ladies from the celebration committee, what shall I talk about tonight if everything is in your notes, which I would encourage you to read while we're doing our little thing here? They say, well, talk about anecdote, talk about yourself. I said, I always talk about myself. They said, tonight it's legitimate. And so I'm quoting one person who I didn't think that he would be here, but he is here, Dr. Harvey Silver. He says, Benny, over the years, you raised the musical IQ of this congregation. Betterment, it's not all. It's all about anecdote. So, when we sang the Hallelujah at the opening, and then the Pirkei Kodesh here, I told one of the rabbis, who will be nameless at this point, and I said, I'm so grateful to all the rabbis who let me do whatever I wanted all these many years. She said, did we have a choice? So, cantors traditionally tried to suit the atmosphere of each prayer to its liturgical moment. Particular modes were felt to work at a certain time of the year, month, week, or day. Each mode, melodic, rhythmic, pattern, or traditional motif carried a characteristic of its own. Medieval Jews believed that prayer mode had a power to influence behavior, and therefore, many of the modes that we use in our prayers are expressing actually the mood of the moment. Now, what I'm reading is a conglomeration of many, many lectures that I've collected over the years, so I'm jumping. To modern Jews acquainted with the nuance of synagogue song, prescribed motifs sung with modes at specific time conjured deep-seated feeling. The key to their effect lies in a history of musical association that each worshiper brings to the service. And then I developed the whole art of chazanut, of the cantorial art, perfectly suits the traditional Jewish worship. Just a few more thoughts and then we start. A prayer mode is a sacred vocal pattern of traditional motifs that retain its identity according to where in the liturgy of the prayer is sung, according to Professor Joe Levine, who was many times here. So, I tried over the years a creation of a traditional based authentic, nusach-friendly service which is accessible, pleasant, participatory, and musically sophisticated and inspirational. How is that for a title? I wrote it. When I came here in 1979, I was aware of incredible leadership, rabbinic leadership, impressive all through the globe, but also the love and the respect and the high regard for music. In the early days, we had a beautiful choir up there with the organ. I hardly could follow them because it was a big distance, with a great organist, Douglas Bodle. But Rabbi Marmor used to always say that with all the beauty of worship, our congregation is always be sung, be preached, and be read. Over the years, I tried to emulate my DNA, which I spoke at the 50th anniversary of my American cantorate, or North American cantorate, and I just want to repeat that, and then we'll go to what I really wanted to do tonight. I assumed in the last few years that the most influence that I was by the passion of the Shtibel, the little Hasidic corner, the highly intellectual approach of the one and only Leib Glantz, and the pedagogical mentoring of my uncle, Israel Alter, who became an icon in the cantorial world. But all of that was wrapped in the community singing, which I experienced as a child, all through my IDF years, in the Bnei Akiva youth movement. Everything was sung, and according to the traditional nuance of every prayer. So, with this, I would like to start and ask you that while we demonstrate the few samples, because there was a whole big list of people that suggested and expressed in their own way why they chose those melodies, because the high holidays cover a whole gamut of favorite, which if I start singing, you'll join with me in any case, because you know them all. But I started with the one that people, which to me is really the most, one of the most highlights. You see, in the cantorial art, there are three levels. There is Chazanut HaSeder, the orderly by the book, by the Shema in the morning, and Shema in the evening, and Shema for the Torah service, and on and on and on. La 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 la, Chazanut HaSeder. But then there's Chazanut HaRegesh, when the cantor goes, oh, Shalom Raham, Al Yisrael Hamcha. That is just the same kind of Regesh and the emotional. And then there was a third one, which my uncle Israel Alter created, and everybody now attributes it to him. Chazanut HaSefer, the cantorial art of the book, where every word counts, where every word must be associated with the melody that lifts the meaning of that particular word. And so it was that this beautiful poem, Mit Neini Eved, which is the beginning of Yom Kippur afternoon, when everybody is half asleep and thirsty, and Tzaharget and Tzamitzert and Tzamatod. If you know Yiddish, you should take a course. Mit Neini, whatever the thread, O God, who created me, it is none but you. And the beginning starts very, very, very pastoralic. But then it says, I'm grateful to you, my creator, my soul you bought, and you understood all my thinking and all my inner anxiety. And then it goes again into a cantorial modern You should come at 3:30 on Yom Kippur in the afternoon, you'll hear it. A very good friend of mine, Chazan Jerry Kapmar, who wrote for us this Mitneni, he also wrote for us Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador, and the beautiful Kedusha that we do on the festivals, Nekadesh et Shimcha Ba'olam. He published many books. He wrote in Etan Tokef, and he is one of the most prolific composers. So I will start not the whole composition because we'll just take a few verses and a few bars of each composition. So temple choir people, just rise for this now. In the middle of this tranquil part, and Nadia will play the last few notes of the choir, and then I will come Yotzri Veroi, the one who created me. You understood me, and you understood the inside of my soul. That's the outburst of the emotion. Yotzri Veroi, Yotzri Veroi, Venavshi Vegevi Kahanita, Bahanta Lerehi, Machshavotay Rahayita, Orechi Verivehi, Verivehi, Vechol Derachai, Zerita. It's one of the most beautiful compositions. I just showed you one little place where the words really are in tune with the music, and every eighth note and every quarter is absolutely written for me because I asked and I designed that piece with Jerry Kapmar. The next piece is the one that we use in the Yizkor service, Adonai Ro'i Lo Echsar, and the whole choir will sing it. Again, it is written by one of our colleagues who is an esteemed composer, who wrote this piece as an a cappella piece for a husband of a friend in his congregation that passed away from cancer, the illness. It was published in 1995, and he said that within few moments, the melody came to him. Everybody remembers, hopefully, that Ben Steinbrück was the composer in residence here and the musical director. And one of the most beautiful pieces that we do always, Shalom Rav Alisa, right? That piece was the most insignificant piece in his repertoire, he told me. He was someplace in the Midwest doing a Shabbat, and they needed a Shalom Rav. So he called his wife Machi, and he said, on the shelf in the room up there somewhere, there's a little piece called Shalom Rav, send it to me. And so it's sometimes only with the muse and with the inner drive that a composer writes. This piece was also written for piano, cantor, choir, symphony orchestra, and recently was performed in St. Martin in the Fields in England. And again, start in the middle, and you recognize it from the Yizkor service. But I must say you that anecdotes, it's written for a choral, but I'm selfish sometimes, and I took a line from the tenors, and I'm singing the line of the tenors, and you'll hear it now. So whenever I sing, it's really not mine, it's the tenor. By the way, in my status as emeritus, I would be more than happy to offer many, many courses of history of Jewish music. It's part of my contract. That's what they told me. I could do it. Okay, so it's in the middle of the piece, Nafshi. Hashem. Yizkor. Avinu Malkeinu, one of the most popular repertoire in the Reform, Conservative, and even if you go on YouTube, there's Mendel, Yankee Lemmer, his brother Lemmer, I forget his first name, a guy with a payas who sings that with an orchestra is unbelievable. A lot of to talk about this piece, written by Janowski, one of the great, great composers. And you know, if you listen to the choir singing, they will never sing it above mezzo piano. The congregation, they go crazy. So today, at the moment of slichot, let's try to sing it all in the very, very intimate. But there are two reasons which I want to give you of why only a person who is steeped in tradition like Max Janowski, because my uncle used to tell me that only a Jew who knows the nusach of the great, great Avinu Malkeinu, which everybody said silently, and in the middle the Baal Tefillah starts, Avinu Malkeinu zochereinu v'zikaron tov lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu. But according to the musicologist Joe Levin, Janowski and many of the composers of that generation wanted to imitate the mood of the mandate, the British mandate, in the early part of the Yishuv. And then there is a song, Al Heharim. On the mountains, herbs, the flocks are roaming and wandering, playing and pasturing, meh, meh, meh. And the music goes like this. Al Heharim, Adarim, Hem rogdim, Adarim, Avinu Malkeinu. Right? So the Avinu Malkeinu is an imitation of a style that was a Mid-Eastern kind of flavor, which a lot of like Arabic and Oriental flavors. So here again, a whole page, which I will once read to you another time, but now we'll just do the middle part of the Avinu Malkeinu. And again, it starts with a pleading, with a slicha, with a forgiving mode. And the words, of course, change because Janowski wrote it for the Union Prayer Book, which only had a very small section of the Avinu Malkeinu. The Avinu Malkeinu, according to the Talmud, was written by, in my notes here, and in your notes here, in the Talmud, in Ta'anit 25, page B, it is a prayer of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva wrote it, and because of persecution over the centuries, that Avinu Malkeinu became very, very large. In the Gates of Repentance, the Reform movement, when they created the prayer book, put the rest of many of the sections, and many of my colleagues turned to me and asked me, how do you fit all the different words into the Avinu Malkeinu? The only one difficult is Yom Kippur morning, because the words are not in the symmetric way in which the original one was called. So we're doing right the middle part when we ask for a Shana Tova, for a new year. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kodeinu, Mesefer Chaim Tovim, Avinu Malkeinu, Chodesh Aleinu, Chodesh Aleinu, Shana Tova. Let's see if you know the rest. Yeah, of course. You'll have a chance to sing it tonight. The next piece, oh, I'm okay. The next piece is already from while I'm talking and giving you anecdotes, there's one anecdote which I forgot to tell you. The first year I was here, Douglas Bodle was up there. Has nothing to do with this, but you know the piece that we sing, Adonai, Adonai, right, when we take out the Torah. This congregation is so sophisticated. You guys don't distinguish between an art and sophisticated composition or a regular shmatadik and nigun. Anyway, but even a melodic line has to have value. And I will demonstrate it now. But I was going to go back to the first, I think it was 1980, or no, 79, the first year. Harvey Fields, Alav Shalom, and I was standing there. And Douglas goes, pom, 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 pom. And he didn't give me the right cue. So I said, Harvey, it's the wrong key. He said, if you don't start, I'm singing it. But he couldn't sing it because it's written for a tenor, and he was a baritone or a bass. That's one of the, I just remembered. Why do I remember this? Because one of the 50 cassettes that I found, one of them is the Blach Sacred Service that we performed in 1982 with Rabbi Fields on a Friday night here. And I found it. All of it will be available for you online, on USBs, on CDs, which nobody knows what it is anymore. So, Berosh Hashanah, which comes right after Unatan Tokef, we have one of the most prolific composers, and again, much to say about him, Meir Finkelstein, who wrote for us, for the world, he wrote Ledor Vador, Ledor Vador. And he wrote Sihim Shalom, Tovahu Bracha. Then he wrote for us Michamocha Ba'elim Adonai, which the arrangement that we sing is of my dear, close, blessed friend who is with us here tonight, Stephen Glass. He wrote that arrangement. Then he wrote, I commissioned him to write the Mishe Berech for the sick. Avinu Shebashamayim, Avinu Shebashamayim. V'shamru on Friday night, and Ve'al Kulam, and Matovu, and so many other things that we use on Meir Finkelstein. But on Rosh Hashanah, I decided to do one of his more placid pieces, which is a beautiful congregational tune, which you will recognize in a minute, and the choir will sing it. Only the temple choir, because temple singers, unfortunately, do not sing on Yom Kippur morning. All right? But, and for a second day, we sing another one. But the difference between a banal and a very sophisticated melody. So here it is. Rosh Hashanah. Right. Rosh Hashanah, Yikateinu, V'yom Tzom Kippur, Yechateinu, V'rosh Hashanah, Yikateinu, V'yom Tzom Kippur, Yechateinu. So the melody, one second, we continue a minute. The melody, that's how I always talk to them. I stop in the middle of the rehearsal. The melody is very beautiful, but then the recitative, the who will die and who will live and all the other things that may happen to us is really expressed very beautifully, almost in a Sprechstimme, but in musical notation. Kama, 2, 3. Kama yaverun vechama yibarehun. Forte. Everybody sing. The next piece is the same text, but a secular melody of Israelis who wrote the piece, Chavurat Zemer. It's not a choir, but it's a group of singing, Chavura Shel Zemer. And they wrote the most beautiful text, but from absolute no knowledge of traditional synagogue music. So they sing it and they perform it like a folk tune. But again, when it comes to the words themselves, you will see how effective it is. We sing it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah because it's a folk tune and it's a lively, beautiful service. So we start together with where the choir comes in. בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייחתמו בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייחתמו בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור Yeah, but I sing it a little bit with my Beny Akiva kind of thing, because I don't sing it the way if you look on YouTube. Some soldiers are singing it. Look up Rosh Hashanah. But so we do a little bit more flair of sacredness. But look the way it continues. כמה יעברון וכמה יברהון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי בקיצו ומי לא בקיצו, מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחיה, מי ברב ומי במגפה. Come second day, you'll hear the whole piece. I'm a yaker, so I'm going to finish right to get the champagne. Now, I know that the next piece is very, very beloved by our congregation. Shomer Israel is a tachanun. It's a plea. And it is at the end of each Amidah on a weekday, when we say tachanun, which is the pleading in the Zavinu Malkeinu, and it's pages upon pages. There are certain sections that are done on Monday and Thursday. There are certain sections that are only done on a regular weekday. But the end of the pleading and the slicha is always the guardian of Israel, Shomer Israel. And the great cantors of the Golden Ages wanted to imitate opera or Broadway because there was a great influence of Broadway on synagogue music and black rhythm. There's a book by Jack Gottlieb, great composer, who wrote an influence of black music on synagogue and synagogue music on Broadway. And he says, if it ain't funny, it ain't Jewish. That's the name of the book. And so, on one foot, I can sing you 7 different Shomer Israel. One of Yosel Rosenblatt, Shomer, Shomer, Yisrael, Shemo, Sheris Yisrael, Yal Yovad. And then there's another one, Shomer, Shomer Israel, Shemo, Sherit Yisrael, Ve'al Yovad. I remembered myself doing it because I just found one of the VHSs that we did on the Israel 50 at C&E with Cantor Paul Kowarski and Yaakov Motzon and myself with Stephen Glass conducting this dream come true that we created together. Shomer Shomer Israel. But this Shomer Israel was written by Izzy Goldstein, who was the dean of the Hebrew Union College Cantorial Music, a dear friend of mine, a dear colleague, a great musician. And what was very special about him, he and my uncle Israel Alter had a love affair. So he arranged many, many, many of the compositions that I now sing in Germany and in New Zealand and in Australia. It is not about me tonight, it's about the music. Shomer Israel is one of the beloved, I know that Rabbi Splensky loves that, but she loves also another piece that I will sing in a minute. So, Shomer Israel, and you know it, Kinderlach, soft. Shomer then it comes. Shomer goyecha, shemor sherit amecha, al yovar goyechad, am yachad im shimcha Adonai, Eloheinu Adonai, Shomer Israel, Shomer Israel. Baruch, Sienna, where are you? Israel, Israel. This smorgasbord of desserts was not chosen by me. It's members of the congregation who chose that. A couple of them I didn't include because I only had 1 hour. And I'm doing good time. The next composer is Max Halfman. Max Halfman, again, there's a whole history about him. He wrote about 500 compositions, and the most beloved one is the Shema Koleinu. And the Shema Koleinu is written really in operatic style. And all my colleagues who had the opera fever, which I had at one point too, because if you don't believe it, I did sing in a choir in Tel Aviv in the chorus while Domingo was the tenor. And my very dear friend, Neil Shikoff, who is the greatest tenor also to this day, who sang La Juive after Caruso. That Shema Koleinu is always sung with robust Shema Koleinu, because people don't understand the inner pulse. Just listen to the beginning. Nadia, 1 second. I couldn't do anything without Nadia here. You know that. She's my right hand. So the accompaniment of this Max Halfman, who was, by the way, a self-taught musician, who wrote all secularly with the Bundist and the leftist and the union choral groups in New York, and his body of work, especially his synagogue music, reveals a carefully calculated use of classical techniques in the contemporary fresh sounding genius with a sense of polish and refinement. All his liturgical music has an absolute aura of originality, and you'll hear it in a minute as you hear the beginning of the Shema Koleinu. I feel that its accompaniment is the heart palpitation, and in Hebrew there's a difference between the word tze'aka, which is shouting, and za'aka, which is Baruch, yearning. Nachon? Za'aka. So when the cantor says Shema Koleinu, it's not a show of the voice, it's the show of the heart. It's a difficult piece. I know that Rabbi Splensky loves that the most. And I sing it in the first Kol Nidre just for her. Not for her, for God and for the people. It's Shliach Tzibur, because it's a pleasure to stand next to her, as it is a pleasure to stand next to Jordan Helfman, our rabbi, and the young man that just joined us, Zach. Unbelievable. I'm so blessed with 3 rabbis. Unbelievable. You got to applaud. Yeah. Okay. Listen. We're going to do the first verse. And receive our prayer. V'kabel berachamim ברחמים וברצון. Even this little coloratura is very calculated because another cantor will go and it really doesn't fit it. So ברצון את תפילתנו. And the next piece is Shirat Ahava, and once again the morning stars will appear and utter songs of love. And the sun will shine forth once again, and on and on. I did some research, which I knew from the Machzor of conservative movement, the Harlem Machzor, had this entire poem. It is also on our Gates of Repentance in the morning, but there's no time to do it in the morning, and it really doesn't fit the liturgy at that point. Hillel Zeitlin, once a journalist, a poet, a social critic, a Torah scholar, a mystic, a philosopher, was one of the permanent literary personalities of Eastern European Jewry in the first part of the 20th century. Zeitlin's life was one of relentless search for God in the modern world as he sought an answer to his longing of his soul. He came from a very observant Chabad family. He was an erudite Talmudist, and then he fell out on this circle, and he read Spinoza, and he read Nietzsche, and he read Schopenhauer, and he read all the secular, and then he came back to Warsaw, and he predicted the doom of the Jewish people. And it was in Erev Rosh Hashanah 1942, Zeitlin was brought out to Umschlagplatz in Warsaw, transportation to Treblinka. Eyewitness account relate that Zeitlin arrived for his final departure wearing his talit and tefillin and the book of the Zohar. And this poem is a universal poem for world renewal, because it really talks about the grandeur of what is there. The end of the song, which I didn't get to, ועוד קו אחד של אור ייבקע והעולם נברא מחדש. And once again, a glimpse of light will come out and the world will be born again. I didn't know that. In 1971, when my little daughter Shira was 8 months old, and I was on the beach in Tel Aviv, 3 blocks from where I grew up, Chof Gordon, everybody knows that beach, one of the most popular beaches, and a melody came to me as I saw the waves go in and out. And I took a piece of paper and I wrote 5 lines of music, and I wrote the melody, and I wrote the piece, and I sang it for many years in my former congregation in Germantown Jewish Center, until this masterful organist, Howard Gamble, whose music, most of the music that you know for the High Holidays, were his originally, and then Nadia's husband, Yafim, rearranged some of it, and a lot of the music is his. He really was my musical mentor, and he wrote it for piano, choir, and cantor. And we did it every year. And the first year I asked Harvey Fields, can I do this here? It became a tradition. Right after the sermon on the first night of Rosh Hashanah and the end of Slichot, we end with this song. So we're not singing the whole thing. Just listen to the angels are singing Shirat Or Lefanecha, Shirat Ahava Lefanecha, Shirat Yetomim Lefanecha. Here we go. Just give me the few. Measure 18. בגבורתו ושער ושער מזה. ועוד הפעם ישירו מלאכים, עוד הפעם the angel will sing to you. And the rest of it you will hear tonight. But now, before we do the things that I wanted to do with everybody, we need to give homage to Sisterhood, recognize and Phyllis Spivak, who commissioned and helped commission this Pirchei Kodesh, this special piece that was written for our renewal. And Rabbi Splensky asked me to write something, and I'm not a composer. I just, sometimes do fool around with some music, but really I'm not a composer. And Stephen Glass, one of the greatest musicians of our time, Jewish musicians, composer, arranger, wanted to do a collaboration, a co-commission. And I didn't know what I would do, so I took some of the themes that I used for Yael Splensky's installation melody from that da-da-dee-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And Stephen took some of this thematic material and created this most beautiful, beautiful piece. We'll do only 2 little sections. If you want to hear the whole thing, we'll wait for phase 2 to happen. Okay, now the last part of it. Let's pray for phase 2 to happen. זה היום. זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ונשמחה בו. זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ובו. זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ונשמחה בו. נגילה ונשמחה בו. נגילה ונשמחה בו. Now comes your turn, because Slichot... can you hear me? Oh, we have 10 minutes, exactly. Amayeke. We love our Slichot service, because Rabbi Maumre and I put it together at the time, and, in Reform Judaism, or in liturgy of Reform Judaism, we don't always follow the traditional sequence. So, for some reason, which I never found out why, the beautiful 2 pieces that we started always, Rachamana, you will see it in your pamphlet because we'll skip it, Rachamana, and then Ki Neka Chomer, which is also a Slicha Piyut poem, but it's for the Slichot of Yom Kippur, the special Slichot of Yom Kippur. And I wanted once to feel the way I felt the first time that I heard this incredible one and only Leib Glantz, who was an ardent Zionist, religious observant, but he couldn't get a job in Israel because he was a Mapainik. He was in the Labor Party. And all the synagogues were run by, like today, Orthodox. But there was a coup in that little synagogue right next to my house, Tiferet Tzvi. And the first slichot, he was a very well-known cantor already of the Golden Age. I kid you not, because if you look it up in newspapers, there were 300 and some people in the synagogue and 5,000 people outside with loudspeakers and police on horses and everything. And I was 10 years old. That was exactly 1954. I'm only 57 now. And that's the way I heard it. And there's a recording, a horrible recording, because in those days the technology wasn't so great. And so we did, with my friend Stephen, who is a blessing in my life, rearranged, and we start slichot today in the traditional way. You have a pamphlet, not now, after the champagne. We come back, and for the slichot service, we start with the Ashrei. Every service starts with Ashrei, but with a special theme. And then we do B'motza'ei Menucha, at the Motza'ei Shabbat, when Shabbat is out. That is the first time Ashkenazi Jews come and do slichot. Sephardic Jews, of course, do it from the beginning of Elul at dawn, at 5 in the morning, before Shacharit. It's 8 verses, and we only do 4 of them, but each verse ends up with Lishmoa el harina ve'el hatfilah, to hear and to hearken to our song, Rina, and our prayer. And there are 3 of them, and I'd like to sing it with the choir in unison, so the congregation can learn it. Because we'll sing it. I said I cannot speak. I can sing a whole Yom Kippur without getting hoarse, but I cannot speak and then sing an hour. So listen to this, which we started before I started the session. Lishmoa number 1. Lishmoa el harina, el harina. Lishmoa el harina ve'el hatefillah. Harmony. Everybody. Lishmoa el harina, el harina. Lishmoa el harina ve'el hatefillah. Then will be a short reading, and then we do the second verse, and at the end of the second verse, we have another melody. Listen to this. Second, please. Lishmoa el harina, Lishmoa el harina, Lishmoa, Lishmoa el harina. Everybody. Lishmoa el harina, Each of them is a gem. The next one, and there's a surprise for the third verse, All of them are very singable. Okay, number 3. Each verse finished with a different lishmoa in a related key, but then at the very end, I will ask you to sing it with me one more time, the first one, which is the simplest one. The first one. And I told you I'm a yeke. Actually, I have 4 more minutes. I can do something. So in conclusion, not in 4 minutes, but in 1 minute, we never sacrificed, or I tried with the encouragement of the rabbis and the devoted temple singers and the devoted temple choir who are part of our family here. But you should be aware this is going to be a magnificent year, which I will never forget, a magnificent celebratory year about what we created here. Because every complicated and sophisticated composition, either before, during, or after, has a melodic sequence that you people share with me. So much so, I can prove it to you. If I start making a nigun now that I improvise, you will sing it in a minute. A lady here knows that because her father was my teacher, Ruchama Danto, and she knows because she knows me when I was 5 years old in Tel Aviv. Her father was my teacher. So this congregation is really, and I was blessed for incredible 40 years, which I don't know how to thank or to say, because it's not to think about it now. It's incredible, and ask the rabbis, when we stand here and we, even in a shacharit daily prayer, daily service, or a small a cappella in the Mishkan on a Saturday morning, everybody sings everything, and in between there's some extra moments that both Lindy and I weave in, and you are just part of it. But the thrill, of course, is on the great days of high holidays and festivals, because then the thrill that we get just inspire us to give it even more. And so the reading and the music is amalgamated into one unit which creates a community in prayer. And with this, I will stop now because I can talk for another 4 hours.
Albert Einstein, who was musician and spiritual seeker as well as scientist, describes the body-soul divide like this: we are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music. This seems to be more true for some of us than for others. I don't know about you and me, but Cantor Meissner is certainly a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. Hechazan Binyamin Ze'ev Ben Yitzchak HaLevi is without a doubt a soul, a neshama, dressed up in sacred biochemical garments. Lungs and larynx, vocal cords and pharynx, from diaphragm to sinuses, these are the instruments through which his beloved soul plays its beloved music. But Cantor Meissner is more than an apparatus of voice and soul. He is voice plus soul plus knowledge. Tonight is a demonstration of, a celebration of Cantor Meissner as a masterful teacher of Judaism. He is a walking storehouse of Jewish texts and tradition, music and melody. His colleagues and congregants alike recognize him as a walking treasure trove of Jewish experiences. He is the inheritor of the Jewish spirit of the last century, from Europe to Israel to North America. Throughout his career, he has drawn from this biography. For more than 40 years, Cantor Meissner is the curator of a museum of Jewish sounds. He guides us through a labyrinth of prayers that are haunting and joyful, evocative and uplifting, often all at the same time. We don't always know where he is taking us, but because we trust him as our shaliach tzibur, our prayer ambassador, we go with him wherever he takes us. Our own thin spiritual lives are entranced and enriched every time, every single time by the journey, without fail, thanks to Cantor Meissner, jumping from note to note to note. And every time we come out on the other side of our prayer journey, more connected to ourselves, to one another, to our heritage, to our God. To be such a teacher requires commitment and courage, skill and strength of spirit. We've come tonight to salute Cantor Meissner as our teacher and our guide. We've come tonight to thank him for carrying us over the threshold of one year to the next, year after year after year. It is far too soon to say Mazel Tov on his retirement, but it is never too soon or too late to say thank you. Toda mirosh, Beny. We are so grateful for all that you are, for all that you have taught us, and for all that we will continue to learn from you and from your one-of-a-kind neshama. Mechayel lechayel, may you go from strength to strength and enduring strength. Now let's turn to our prayer book for Havdalah, page 457, and we call Rabbi Helfman, Rabbi Goodman, and cantorial soloist Lindy Rivers to lead us. (457).
הנה אל ישועתי יפתח ולא יפחד, כי יוזיף וזמרתי אדוני ויהי לי לישועה. ושאבתם מים בששון ממענה הישועה. לאדוני הישועה, על עמך בחטאיך סלה. אדוני צבאות עמנו, משגב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלה. אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך. אדוני הושיע מלך יעננו ביום קוראנו. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה בששון ויקר, כן תהיה לנו. Lai lai la 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 lai 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 la 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 lai la lai lai la 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 lai la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen borei peri hagafen lai lai la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei esamim borei minei esamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei haesh borei meorei haesh. La 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol hamavdil kodesh lechol ben Yisrael amim ben yom hashvi'i לששת ימי המעשה. ברוך אתה אדוני המבדיל בין קודש לחול. אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו הגלעדי. במהרה בימינו יבוא אלינו עם משיח בן דוד, עם משיח בן דוד. אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו
We invite everyone to join us in the Schwartz-Riesman atrium. You can get there through either door on the sides of the bima. Dessert is waiting for us, and we'll raise up a glass to toast a few words of tribute to Cantor Meissner, and then we'll return here for our Slichot services with the exquisite music which Cantor Meissner, Stephen Glass, the Temple Singers, and Nadia Adler have prepared for us. These Slichot prayers will stir our souls and ready us for the coming days of awe just on the horizon. Shavua Tov.